All right, this morning we have an exciting story in Baptist history, and I've told the story before, but I want to use it to kick off several weeks of talking about this young man and his ministry for the Lord. But on August 9, 1788, a baby son was born into the home with some godly parents. In fact, the father was a congregational minister, and he really prayed that his son would follow him into the ministry. The mother was an extraordinary teacher, and the little 3-year-old boy, she actually taught the 3-year-old boy to read. And one day when the father was out on a journey, she finished teaching him how to read and read a chapter from the Bible. And when the father came home, just thrilled to see his little boy read an entire psalm from the Bible at 3 years of age. And he was a brilliant little boy, as it turns out. But that was a detriment to him as he grew up. He was proud of that, and it really, even though he was raised in this godly home, it was later, it was said that it was because of that, maybe acknowledgement of his own mental brilliance, that it caused him to reject Christianity. If he became a Christian, he thought, how could he expect to make a great name for himself? He respected his father, but his father was just a country preacher. And he knew that he had a lot more that he could do himself, and Christianity would not help him get there. So he was not saved. He was not converted at a young age and grew up in that home. When he was 15, actually on his 16th birthday, he was ready to enter college. And his father had gone to Yale, which was a congregational school. But the father realized that the liberal theology had begun to come into Yale, and the father wanted him to go to a smaller college, Rhode Island College in Providence, Rhode Island, mostly known as Providence College. And so the young man went there and made a great impression on the faculty. The college was very small. The student body was very small, but he would make his mark there. Became very popular. It was this student body that would make a mark on the world. This student body would produce a congressman, a justice of the state Supreme Court, a governor of New York, a senator, a secretary of war, and a secretary of state. Very interesting, the very well-known people that came from that college. But this college, being in Rhode Island, you might have imagined, and you're right, is that it was a Baptist school. But it was in that school that, the French, I would say French infidelity, the French beliefs had come into that school, and that school also was slowly being turned from God. And it permeated the student body, and this young son of the congregational pastor soon found that he was learning other things in college other than Christianity. The class above him, so when he was a junior, the senior class above him, there was a leading student by the name of Jacob Eames, E-A-M-E-S, Eames. And this student was very popular, maybe the most popular student in the student body. He was amiable, he was talented, he was witty, he was brilliant, and our young student really latched onto him. The only problem with this student was that he was a deist. He was not a Christian. And deism acknowledges God, just to be real simple about this, but deism to me acknowledges God, but it does reject Jesus Christ, and it rejects the atonement. But deism is a popular religion among intellectual elites. And so our student was fascinated with this year older student, Jacob Eames, and he would become a deist, following in Eames's footsteps. And so he graduated Eames graduated in 1805, and our student, in 1806. Our student graduated in September of 1807 with a Bachelor of Arts. He went home. At that time, he opened an academy. He wrote 2 books that were very popular and well-read in the world of academia. The volumes were Elements of English Grammar and A Young Lady's Arithmetic. But he grew restless. This was not what he wanted to do. He wanted to make a mark on the world. He didn't want to just teach in some lowly academy. And so he made plans. To him, the ultimate would be to be like a thespian, to act in plays, and in our vernacular, be a Hollywood star. This was the equivalent of that. And so he was restless, and he dreamed for the day that he could make a name for himself upon the stage. He announced his plans to his parents to go to New York City. They were devastated. They couldn't understand their son that they had raised in this godly home, how in the world he could turn on God, even though he'd never been saved, but turn on God and turn on them. His father tried to talk with him, but he argued. He overcame all his father's arguments with ease, and he was determined to leave Plymouth, Massachusetts, and make his way into the world. So he did. On August 15th, 1808, he mounted his horse, and it went out to win his fame. And he made his way to New York, but what he found out when he got to New York was that it was the off season, and the theaters were all closed. And so he he hooked up with what they call it, like a shabby band of actors that kind of made their way. They're vagabonds mostly, and they made their way around every night. He's trying to find a place to sleep, and after about a month of that, he said, "I've had enough of that. This is not what I dreamed of, being world famous." And he was on his way home, and he stopped in a small village, and stopped at a local inn to spend the night. When he checked in, the inn was full except for one room, and the innkeeper said to him, he said, "You can have that room, but I just want to tell you that the man next door is dying, and it's pretty loud, it's pretty bad, and there'll be people in and out all night, and he's having a rough death." Of course, this is early 1800s. And death was common in old New England. That wasn't uncommon, but there he was. And he said, "No, it's no problem. I'll sleep like a baby." And he took that room. However, when he lay down, the noise did bother him, and this man was having a difficult time, not just in pain, but wrestling with dying, and what would happen after he died. He was terrified of what would happen to him, this man that was dying in the next room. So eventually, though, and this really worked on him, he eventually did fall asleep, had a restless night. But in the morning, he got up and inquired of the innkeeper. He said, what happened last night? Everything okay? And the guy said, "No, the man died." And he said, "Died?" He said, "I didn't expect it to happen right there, next to me." And he said, "Do you know who the man was?" And he said, "Yes, he actually is just a Regent graduate of Providence College. His name is Jacob Eames." Jacob Eames is the fellow that was a year ahead of him, that was the deist. This was devastating to our young man. Just threw him for a loop. He realized what really haunted him was this man crying out, realizing he was dying without God and dying without Christ. He knew only one thing to do. He got on his horse and headed home. And he sought God with all his heart. On December 2nd, 1808, this young man found peace through faith in Jesus Christ and was gloriously saved. Now I'll tell you who it is. This is Adoniram Judson, and who will become, in Baptist circles, probably one of the greatest missionaries of all time, and what he will do. And just a fascinating story of how God worked on his heart and how God led him to become a Christian. And so I use that as a jumping off spot to begin a series of talks on Adoniram Judson, and we'll start that next week. And just wanted to give you his testimony, and we'll learn how his journey from a Congregationalist to a Baptist. He was still a Congregationalist at this point, but we'll learn about that next week, and how God used all this in his life to make him the great missionary that he would become. So thank the Lord for this young man, maybe more so how God works in our hearts, and how God works in all of our hearts, and how God worked in his heart, and to bring him to salvation. So I thank the Lord this morning for Adoniram Judson and his journey in his faith.